Overwhelmed with your digital chores? Let us lend a hand. From websites and animal management to internet auctions, graphic design, marketing, search engine optimization, and more, Hired Hand Software is your hired hand for all things digital.
Specializing in pedigree, livestock, breeds, and beyond, we handle the tech so you can focus on the animals you love. Visit hiredhandsoftware.com today, where your digital chores just got a whole lot easier.
Hi there, I'm Molly.
And I'm Jamie, and this is our From the Pasture with Hired Hand podcast.
For 15 years now, we've been proudly helping breeders promote hundreds of thousands of pedigree livestock with our easy-to-use animal management-driven website software.
And let's not forget about Hired Hand Live, where over $1 million worth of livestock is sold online each year.
We're excited to bring you market trends, sales data, advice from your fellow breeders, and stories from the ranch.
Our software makes managing your website and your animals a breeze, so you can focus on what you love.
So let us handle your digital chores while you tune in to another episode of From the Pasture with Hired Hand. Today I'm thrilled to be joined with John T. and Betty Baker, the breeders of Bevo, the iconic mascot for the University of Texas Longhorn football team. For nearly 100 years, Bevo has represented the spirit, strength, and pride of Texas on and off the field, becoming one of the most recognized mascots in college sports. More than just a symbol, Bevo has embodied the toughness and resilience that the Texas Longhorn breed is known for, qualities that breeders like the Bakers have helped to preserve and promote. Beyond their connection to Bevo, the Bakers have been instrumental in shaping the future of the registered Texas Longhorn breed, contributing to its growth through their dedication to breeding, showing, and educating the next generation of ranchers. Today we're going to dive into the legacy of Bevo, hear their stories, and learn more about their involvement in preserving the history and integrity of this remarkable breed. Thank you so much for joining me today, Betty.
Yes, thank you.
Well, let's go ahead and jump in. We'll start here with kind of the story of Bevo. How did you all get involved in being the provider or the breeder for the Bevos, past and present, for the University of Texas?
Well, we've always shown steers, especially steers, and we've kind of been known for that, I think. And we were showing steers at the Austin-Travis County Livestock Show. It just so happened that Bevo 13, our first steer, because Bevo was there. The committee of 6 guys came by and they were looking for the next Bevo. But they went all over the state looking for the next Bevo with the same qualifications pretty much. And then I guess it was about the end of the summer, they came back to us and they said, we really did like the one we saw first of all and wondered if we could possibly use him for our next Bevo. And we said, sure. So that's how we got into it.
And you said that was with number 13?
That's 13.
And what are we on today?
We're on 15. So 14, when 13 got too old and, they kind of look bony, and even though that's the way they're supposed to look, older and bonier and thinner maybe. And he was there for 16 years, so that's a long time. So then after that, they said, well, it's about time for another one. So we never got into it. We stayed out of it completely. And so they said, well, they kept looking around, everything. They said, well, do you have anything? And we said, yeah, we do. We have one that you might like. And so they said, well, let us look at him. And so he was on another pasture. So we brought him home. Oh my gosh, they fell in love with him. He's just perfect. He's just the one we want. So we said, okay. That's how number 14 got the next Bevo. But he didn't get to stay very long because he got a cancer in his stomach. And that was a very, very sad, sad time because this happened. He died in October and football season still wasn't over. So it was a really sad time for everybody. And so they did everything they could. They operated on him. They did everything, but with that, he just couldn't survive. And so when he passed away, they said, well, do you have anything else? We said, nothing but babies. And so they said, well, let us look at your babies. And I mean babies. Molly, babies are like less than a year old. That's the way he was. But he was just such the perfect color. Perfect blood orange. He had all those qualities, and he had these little rings around his eyes that they liked, and they just kind of got to where they just fell in love with him, but they didn't commit again. So we had the 6 guys, again, the committee that went all over the state. And so John, he just walked in, just said, well, if we think he's good, let's take him to shows and let's see what other people think. So every time we took him to a show, he won. And so everybody was just saying, I'll see the next Bevo. We don't know, but we don't know. And so we just kept taking him and everything. And so we finally took him to the big show, Fort Worth, and that's where John Chase had that big Longhorn steer show. And I told John, I said, all I want is for him to win junior champion. That'll make me happy. Well, he did. He won junior champion. Then he had to go, as you understand all this, he had to go against the senior champions. And here was this little guy that he just I just couldn't believe it. But anyway, the judge evidently told one of the ringmen who told us, he said, I'm going to shock everybody in here, but that junior steer just can't be beat. So he won the whole thing out of 138, I think John said. And so then they still hadn't really said he's the one, but we kind of figured that was going to be the one. And so after that, he was chosen for Bevo 15. That's kind of how he started. And when he was little, he was kind of like a little kid with big shoes, kind of wears daddy's shoes, and he had a big halter on. Kind of funny, like a little kid with a big halter. But he grew, and every year, when he was there the next year, people would say, oh my gosh, he was baby Bevo, and now he's bigger, and every year he got bigger and bigger and bigger. And so they have grown with him, and they have loved him, and he has served us well. So that's kind of how it happened.
It was probably easier maybe for folks to form a special attachment with him starting so young. They kind of felt like they watched him grow up, I'm sure.
That's right. They did. And they kind of liked that. They kind of said it was sort of like a little baby growing. And every year he grew bigger and better, and now they're just thrilled with him and they love him. He's been wonderful. He's a good one.
Well, what was it like the very first time you saw one of your Longhorns as Bevo take the role of such an iconic mascot? What were you feeling?
I felt, and I think John did too, it's kind of like parents when you see your kid out there for the first time in some kind of a competition. You're worried, and hopefully you're hopeful that they will do the right thing and not do something crazy or whatever. And so anyway, I think it was excitement, and I think it was nervousness, but yet proud too. All of the above.
So you mentioned a few times that you were, the committee told you have to go, we're going to keep looking. They didn't really commit right away. Do you think that there's a unique skill or trait that they were looking for in Bevo that maybe they just wanted to be sure that yours had?
Yeah, they have to be, of course, the right color. They have to be Texas born. They can't be Oklahoma or any other state. It has to be Texas born. And of course, one of the things you never know is how big their horns are going to get. You just don't know that. And that was one of the things people kept saying, well, how big are his horns going to get? We said, well, it's like asking a parent, how big is your kid going to get? We don't know that. Luckily, he got some nice horns. He's not the largest, biggest horned animal, but he's perfect for what we need for the boys that handle him, and there are 4 guys that handle him. And so that was one thing. Another thing is we're not that far, and there aren't that many ranches that are close where he can stay. And then the other thing that is very, very lucrative for them is that they have a trainer named John. And John has shown so many cattle and everything, and that is a big plus because these city boys didn't know a whole lot about how to handle a big animal. And so he had to start from the very beginning, and that was another plus.
So I think I know the answer to this, but I'm still going to ask it. Were you all University of Texas Longhorn football fans before your breeding Bevo?
I did not go to school there. We went to Nebby University, but I'd say yes, I was for sure. And I think it didn't take too long to become one after that.
Do you all attend a lot of the games, or at least
all of the games? All of the games, here or there. We go to in town and out of town.
And do you have a favorite memory, or a favorite game, whether it be because of Bevo or just from being fans?
Came out of California that year that they won the whole thing there, and Bevo was there. Bowl game in California. I forgot what year it was.
That was 14. Bevo 14.
Was that 14? Yeah.
And Bevo 13, one of my memories was that we went to Bush's inauguration in Washington, D.C. That was pretty awesome. And so that's that one and the one John was talking about are probably the most memorable ones.
Yeah. 13 went one trip and 14 the other one.
No, 13 went to both.
13 went
I
to
think
both.
so,
Okay.
yeah.
A lot of years go by and it's hard to remember all those events of 38 years.
It is, isn't it?
Just about when you were born.
Now you're being generous. What do you think it is about the Texas Longhorn that resonates so strongly with Texans and Longhorn fans?
I think it's the boldness of the animal, the size, the braveness, all those things that he exudes as an animal, and it just kind of represents Texas. It's just I guess some people would say they're ferocious. He's not really ferocious, but I mean, some people would think that he was because he's big horns and he's a big animal. That's kind of what I think it represents, because a lot of people ask that same thing, and think it's his boldness and his just the way he looks and the way he represents, and so I think that's probably mainly it.
What's one thing that you wish fans knew about Bevo or about the Bevos that you all have bred that they might not realize or they might not know?
I understood your question correctly, that one thing we'd like the people to understand, they come as a shock sometime when they ask if you've given them any dope. And I can assure you that since 1988, the first year we had any involvement with Bevos, those Longhorns in that capacity, it's never had 1 cc or ounce of any type of sedative dope. Where people are astonished to hear that. Some don't think, well, he's so docile, he just must be doped up. I can assure you there has never been, since Bevo 13 started in August of '88, ever any of that problem.
And to add why, is because they're halter broken. All the people before that were not halter broken.
That's true.
That makes a big difference, as you know.
I was just going to say is they probably don't realize the hours upon hours of you all's work that goes into preparing them for that
That's
role.
exactly right. Mm-hmm.
Those steers probably go back. You probably showed against them in some days ago.
Well, let's talk a little bit about kind of his daily life and care, or all three of them, kind of through the years. So what are some unique aspects of caring specifically and raising specifically Bevo compared to your other Longhorns?
He's in his own pasture with his half brother, and they have been together ever since, beginning. But anyway, they eat hay, they eat sweet feed sometimes, and they have liquid feed. You know what I'm talking about. Every day, that's my job. I go out in the Ranger, and every day I feed him hay, because the grass around here has been pretty scarce because we haven't had any rain, except we had a little today, but very little rain. So anyway, they haven't had much to eat, so he has to be fed. Anyway, I feed him every day anyway. And then I take a look at him, and I brush him, and I love on him, and I give him kisses, and he puts his head up on my shoulder and wants to be scratched under his skin. You know how that is. So it's kind of the daily thing that he would go through every day. Check on him and be sure he's okay.
Very limited on that sweet feed. He's mainly a hay man. The sweet feed is a treasure once in a while, not a daily.
Is it his typical day different when you're preparing him for an event or a game day than it is if there's a away game or during the off season?
On game days, according to whether it's 11 o'clock game in the morning or a 2:30 in the afternoon or 6:30 in the evening, would obviously dictate his involvement. He normally arrives at the stadium 3 hours before game time. Because, for example, if it's 11 o'clock game time, he's got to be there at 8 o'clock in the morning, because they have a parade down Bevo Boulevard. And there's a lot of vendors all up and down there for a quarter mile or so that he walks. They bring him there in the trailer, take him out of the trailer. The band leads and goes through the thousands of people lined up on the street 3 hours before the game time. So that's just the whoop and the holler and going. They drive the truck and the trailer ahead of Bevo and lay him back 15 or 20 feet. Lead him down the street, and crowds going crazy on each side of you. Think
the king was coming.
The what?
The king was coming.
Yeah. And that's pretty invigorating, as you could say. You see people so happy, and that's free game, 3 hours. And on Saturday morning at 8 o'clock, you got thousands of people already lying in the streets before 11 o'clock kickoff, for example. It's, I guess it's exhilarating, both to the steer and to all the people.
You just wouldn't believe, Molly, how crazy these people are about that steer. I mean, I just cannot believe it. I mean, the cameras, I mean, they take pictures of him in the trailer, wherever they can get a picture. They go nuts. I have never in my life seen anything like it. I wish you could witness that sometime and see what that's like, because it is, you just never realize how crazy people are, but they are really nuts when it comes to that steer.
Do you think there's any superstitions tied to the various numbers and the records of this football team or anything like that? Is it some superstitions going on?
I don't think so. No superstitions. I don't think so. No.
Just play the game, play hard.
Well, you talked about kind of pregame. What does his schedule and his role look like during the game once the team takes the field?
They have a special pen built down in the southwest corner quadrant of the stadium. It's a big stadium. And they built him a special area for him. They got everything from fans with water on them and all that kind of stuff to keep him cool on hot days. We lead him all the way into the stadium and into his pen, his area. It's designated well. And then after everything settles a little bit, we take that steer and take him out of the pen and go back through the trails, if you're on this big, massive building and a tunnel, and where he's going to come out pre-game. And you've probably seen that perchance on media or something. But we run him through there 3 times to sort of acclimate just to the environment. So we lead him, and he looks at everything on the ground. If you put a rubber mat right there, he won't stop and look at it because he don't know if there's a hole underneath it, and maybe it's covering up more than a steel top on a hole. But anyhow, we do that 3 times pre-game. So he is on the field in his quarters, and he knows exactly where they are. Got Misty fans in there and the whole bit, and of course, and people come by and take hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pictures. They'll get up there and stand in front of him. It always tickles me. I give them a little coaching when appropriate. They line up a whole army in front of Bevo. I said, and they want to take a picture of Bevo. I said, well, let's put 2 people over here, 2 people over here, but Bevo in the middle, make a reasonable picture. But they'll tell them how many 100 pictures are taken every Saturday. Hundreds, literally. People just come by and just snap, click, snap.
Molly, one time when they always do this, we call it smoke, but you know what I'm talking about when the team comes out? Okay. One time they did that, and well, he didn't know. I mean, they did it a little bit wrong or whatever, and he jumped over it, and then he was up in the air, and oh my God, people just think that's the worst. That's the best thing I've ever seen, and they want to know how we taught him to do that. But anyway, it's very exciting. He gets introduced, and everybody's going crazy. You know, it's really neat, really neat.
They run him out just before the team comes on the field out of the tunnel, which, if you will, or moisture, whatever they do there. And it's, you get 100,000 people hollering or more, whether it's for Bevo or the football team or whatever, or the cheerleaders, the whole bit. It's, I guess it's invigorating. Probably stirs him up a little too, because he sort of stands his attention.
And then is his job over, or does he have anything that he does during halftime or after the game?
After the game, after the crowd clears out, there's so many corridors all through a large stadium dissipating 100,000 plus people. I have to wait probably 30 to 45 minutes till it sort of the crowd settles, filters out, because they've got the truck and the trailer back up some into the stadium itself, not all the way to his gate. So we walk him out 100 yards maybe from his pen to where the trailer's parked in the stadium, but sort of down the corridors. And so they put him in there. There are hundreds of people out there watching him exit. And even after he gets in the trailer, he got a little slot across there, you know. They got cameras up in there, just amazing. It's intriguing what people do.
So how do you think his popularity has brought more attention to the Texas Longhorn breed overall? I would assume that for a lot of those folks that are enamored by him, it might be the first time they've been that close to a Longhorn. You know, what do you think they go away from game day with, or what do you think they take away about the breed from him?
Well, as recently as this past weekend, a man came up to me, introduced himself, and said, "I've got so long. We were in Arkansas." So I asked him a few questions, and I knew the gentleman he bought his cattle from to get a start. He was exhilarated. He wanted some Longhorns. He'd actually been born and raised in Texas, but I think till he was 4 or 5 years old, but he still carried a root there, if you will. But he now has Longhorns. I don't know how many, but he was excited to have Bevo come in there just like his Longhorns, type and kind, if you will. So I found that interesting, and we see that on the road sometimes. You'd be anywhere. The guy that we had as a guest this weekend, he's from Arkansas, and he's got Longhorn cattle. So somehow or another, there's a little gravity or magnetism in there somewhere.
And then I'm going to tell the best story.
Go ahead.
We sold 2 of them to Reba McIntyre, and they found out Rex, her boyfriend, Rex Lynn, wanted a half brother of Bevo's. It had to be a half brother, so we happened to have a half brother. So we delivered them to their place in Nashville, in the Nashville area, to their ranch. And she wanted one that was black and white, so we took her a black and white. We took him, half brother of Bevo's, and he called him Hatch. Hers is named Rowdy. Anyway, recently we were in Nashville for the game with Vanderbilt, and we went back to the ranch to see them, and they are pampered like you wouldn't believe, and they love those animals. So that's just kind of how, once you have a Bevo and they know you, he kind of gets around, the word gets around, and that's how we got connected with them too. So we had lots of connections like that through Bevo.
Are there any other celebrities that you've been able to meet because of him?
Yeah, you probably wouldn't know them though. They're like, it's a lady that, it's a very, very, very wealthy lady that graduated from UT. Kendra Scott is her name. She bought some from us, but she's very well known all over Texas. I don't know if she's known anywhere else, but she's very popular. It's very jewelry lady, and it's done very well with that. And yeah, it's. We think about anybody else that we've done with her. That's it. Anybody else that we've sold to that's like yeah, we have to just think about it, I guess. But a lot of guys that are, sort of like involved with the university, like been on the board of the university or something. We've sold some to them, and so it's kind of that way, where people learn about you and come because of that.
If they own any acreage anywhere, large or small, and if they are a strong supporter, maybe a graduate from UT with varying kind of degrees and degrees. I'm not going to use any names, but I just thinking back, man, once he had him a big piece of dirt out there and he was a UTX, he needed some Longhorns out there to sort of.
It's art. We call it art. That's what they want. They just want to look at them on the weekends or whatever. That's all.
So do you think that there's a correlation between Bevo's role and kind of the heritage of Longhorns overall?
I think he represents the breed reasonably well. There's a lot of different physique, if you will, on different cattle, Longhorn cattle. I have pictures of all the previous 12 Longhorns, and we have 13, 14, and 15, coincidentally, over a 38-year period. But you'd be surprised if I showed you all those pictures how the Longhorn has developed from 19, whatever that first one was. There were some voids in there during World War II and so forth. But the cattle have grown dynamically, both every structure, their physique, horn, the earlier Longhorn cattle, typically, with exceptions, were not as large horned as there are today or have been for the past 20 or 30 years, but we've seen all that grow.
It's a good segue into kind of our next topic. So for our listeners, I think they've picked up that we know each other pretty well, but I grew up showing, and you guys were kind of celebrities and idols, and, you always were willing to help any youth who wanted to, get better or improve. And I think all of us that knew you, we're just so thankful for your role in the industry. But for those that don't know and that don't share my same background, tell me the story about how you first got involved with Registered Texas Longhorns and kind of where it took you throughout the years.
I completed my 5 years flying in the Navy and came to Liberty Hill, Texas. That's in the Austin area. during a period of time there, my dad, who had another place north of San Antonio, American Indian, had one Longhorn cow. And long story made real short, we gave my dad that cow for a token amount of money that my dad had granted to that Indian when he needed a little extra benefit. And after I got here and I had started buying this place that we live, way back when I was in the Navy, and I thought, well, if you got grass, I rested it for about a year because it had been overgrazed by the previous owner. As soon as I could, I thought I needed some cattle. And I'll abbreviate a story. I was in the aviation business, and a guy invited me to go with him to a Longhorn sale in Kerrville, Texas. You know, it is the Wild Ranch. And so he wanted to fly over there because he just got his license. Asked me to go with him, maybe a little coach. So we flew over there to a sale. And I didn't buy anything. I didn't go to buy. I just went there as an escort. But he invited me to go back the next year. And in that year, I bought the first Longhorn, first two that I bought came from that sale to Wild Ranch beyond Kerrville, Texas, as you're familiar, I'm sure. So that's where I got the first ones, and I thought if you're going to do it, and of course we got a few more here and there yonder, and I tried to learn about the cattle a little bit over time. And before it's over, you got a bunch of them.
I feel like you're skipping some important parts there because your breeding became very well known very quickly for those of us, showing and back then. So tell me a little bit about how you went from being kind of buying a few here and there to playing such an integral role in the show circuit.
John's always been one of those people that if he's going to do something, he wants to do it the best. And so he would watch people and he would learn. He never took any lessons or anything from anybody. He just watched the professionals that knew how to show cattle well. And so he'd study it and he'd watch them. And so as a result, and then he'd study the cattle and, he'd, try to figure out what was good and all that kind of stuff. And that's kind of how he got into it, I think. Because if he was going to do it, he was going to do it and go to the top, or either he didn't want to do it kind of thing. So I think that's probably how it started because he always, got into it. And when he got into it, we did a lot of showing, just like you all did. And then when little John T came along, of course, we were to show every weekend. Anyway, I think that's probably what happened. He just, and then he had a good bull named Admiral that kind of had a lot of offspring, and that kind of, meant one thing went to the next. And so I think that's kind of what happened, don't you?
Yeah, if we get into anything, I like to give it what I call 110%. I don't like to ride on the back bumper. I don't want to do anything, just learn the game and play hard, fair, and straight. And if you learn characteristics, that somebody had some characteristics in this animal over here that was continuous winter, it might be a good thing to see if you could replicate that. And that's what happens. And then you have some successes.
He's a competitor. That's another thing. He likes to compete. So anyway.
That's true. That's true.
And one of your questions that you asked, I know, was, well, how do we start the camp then? I don't know if you're there yet, but that was one of the reasons because people kept watching him and they kept saying, you know what, you're winning a lot, so would you think about doing a camp? He said, never thought about it. That's how that started.
Well, and it wasn't just winning with animals, it was winning. John T. was always the guy you had to beat in showmanship too, so it was not just having the great animals, it was presenting them very well too.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
Before we talk about the camp, because I do want to go over some questions about that. Let's talk a little bit more about kind of your history breeding. So you mentioned Admiral, and previous to that, you had mentioned how Longhorns have really changed and progressed over the past 20, 30 years. Tell me a little bit about Admiral and kind of what made him such a successful bull back then that maybe today folks would completely be overlooking with how things have changed.
Information, to put it in one word, I'll amplify, but we were seeing some trending, a little more muscle structure throughout the animal than probably had been historical years before. Judges appeared, these animals, however you look at it, they're more than a piece to put on your lapel or somewhere like that. So you have to realistically think about what that animal can be used for beyond people looking at it, i.e. meat. It's not a big, heavy muscled animal in the cattle industry, but we did note, and the cattle that were continuously winning, if you will, were those with a little more muscle structure and good conformation to the animal. So therefore, if you see that's the way it is trending for an element of the people, it'd be a good mold to follow. So I know how to get there. If you need to find a bull and a cow that have a little more muscle structure and many other factors than just the word muscle. But that would be a visual point you can
He was never a horn. He never had big horns. So
no.
Wasn't a horn guy.
That's
Today
right.
it's
That's right.
That's what I was just going to ask, is I feel like back then we never got asked what their tip-to-tip was. We might have got asked how much they weighed or, that sort of stuff. But if you had to guess what his tip-to-tip was, John T., what would you, is it in the 40s, the 50s?
tip, you think?
Oh, about 40.
Yeah.
Barely a little bit more than that, but it wasn't big.
I remember, and something you probably know in your archives of information. I can't tell you what year it was, but it was in the 70s. The association, somebody had an idea, said, Molly has a cow that's got 40 inches of horn. John would go up there, or anybody else, and measure it. So, yeah, she got 40.5 inches. And you send a piece of paper to the office, they'd send you back something to tell you had a super cow.
Yeah.
And that's where that competition on the horn business started in the 70s. I can't tell you if it was 71 or 78 or 9 or in between. But at that point, obviously, horns had an impact. I understand that. That's all. Today, but if you talk to what's happened in the past 50 years, we went from a 40-inch top cow, reportedly, to 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, and some of them are at 100 today. So see what genetics can do if you breed back longhorns to longhorns to longhorns for years. Rome wasn't built in a day, and neither was this horn growth. But I remember when it was, it's that rabbit. But I remember when 40 inches was a super cow, if you will.
Do you still have some of your certificates?
Oh, I never got any. No, I might have had some, but I didn't get that race. When people were working in good faith on the horns, I was working on the conformation. That was my MO. And that's what I took to town, and we got along reasonably well.
I was going to say, you have plenty of ribbons and bronzes and buckles from that, I know.
That's true.
Yes, so true. That's called history behind us.
Well, you mentioned that your son showed, John T. Jr. showed growing up, and that kept you busy. You all were somewhat involved or around when the TLBT started, is that right? And did you have a role in that at all? Did you help kind of get that going, or were you just supporters of it through John T. showing?
Well, I don't know how that actually got going. Gold Merit and all that stuff started, the Gold Merit speeches and all that. So I was involved with that for a while, but I don't know exactly where that ever started. And then you were a president, ahead of him, I guess. And then he was the next president. And then there was Dustin. Oh, y'all like 1, 2, 3 or something. So I don't know exactly, Molly, how that all really got started. But I helped a little bit in the Gold Merit part of it, but not really in the organization.
And with the Gold Merit, I feel like the thing that was so awesome about that at the time is if you won, or maybe it was if you placed, I don't remember, Betty, maybe you do, but you got a cow from a very respectable breeder, and you got to keep a diary on that cow and bring her back and show her next year. It was awesome for us kids to have access to that.
Sure.
And now a word from our sponsors.
Looking for top quality Longhorns and a taste of true Texas spirit? Look no further than Cantera Cattle Company. Our passion for Longhorns shines at Old Gringo Ranch, where tradition meets excellence. Visit us online at CanteraCattleCompany.com and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok for the latest updates and ranch life fun. Ready to experience it yourself? Schedule your visit by emailing canterracattle@gmail.com. Remember, God is great, Longhorns are good, and life is crazy.
Do you sometimes feel like you're the only one who doesn't have it all figured out? Rural life can be isolating, but it doesn't have to be.
Welcome to Ag's Most Okayest Farm Girls, the podcast for women who are craving connection, laughter, solidarity, camaraderie, and just overall encouragement in your everyday life and dreams.
Each week, your hosts, Annalise, that's me, and Courtney will cover topics such as farm life, mom life, making money online, side hustles, hobbies, sharing on social media, jobs off the farm, and so much more.
Us rural gals need to stick together, so saddle up for some fun, real, and unsolicited advice and stories from our everyday farm lives.
Grab a drink, we're Ag's Most Okayest Farm Girls, and we're here to help. Listen wherever you find podcasts.
Are you a new Longhorn breeder eager to educate yourself on market trends and sale prices? Stay in the loop with our text messages. Get the latest updates, events, and insider tips on all things Longhorns delivered straight to your phone.
Stay informed by texting website to 888-700-8131, then reply with Longhorns. That's website to 888-700-8131. Sign up today and take your breeding program to the next level.
Well, let's talk a little bit about your camp that you mentioned earlier. So just tell me kind of how that started and also how that grew over the years and kind of changed and became, multiple things to serve within the breed as well.
Well, it started, Molly, like I said before, it started with people watching John win in showmanship and everything. And so that's when some of the parents came to him and said, you know what? You've been winning these shows and all this with showmanship stuff. Why don't you do a camp? And so John said, well, I never thought about it. So anyway, we did. We started one, and we started out with about 5 kids, and they stayed in the house for a little while, and I kept not being able to sleep at night because they were shuffling around. And I said, finally, after a few times like that, I said, John, if we're going to do this, let's build a little place, where these kids can stay, because I don't want them in the house. So we did. We did a little bunkhouse kind of thing, and well, as it ended up, it was word of mouth, and before we knew it, we ran the camp kind of like a boot camp in a way, because we were very strict. We were yes ma'ams, no ma'ams, and none of this y'all and any of that. We just really were strict with them, and we made them mind, and we made them, I don't know, it was just amazing what happened to some of these kids, because we grew from little bitty to 40. I mean, and it was just like we were at the max. We couldn't take any more. And it was like a week long. And it was like every morning it was early up, and breakfast. And then it was like John took them out in the cow pen till 10 o'clock, and they had a break. Then we had lunch at 12. And then we took them on buses to go to swim or caves or whatever there was to do in the afternoon. And then brought them back, and they were hungry, so we fed them again. Then they went back to the cow pen. They stayed up there till 9 o'clock, again, working. And you'd think they were just dead tired. But these little girls, somewhere or another, they were able to go into the crowded rooms they were in and find this cute little dress or something and put it on, and they were ready for the little dance that night. We just had to laugh and laugh, because some of those kids were so amazing, because they would be like, oh, I'm so tired. And then all of a sudden, here they come with their little dance dress on, and boy, they could kick those legs up and back. So we had a lot of laughs, but that went on a week, and by the time the week was over, well, it was like exhausting, because it was up early every morning and late at night, because we had counselors that we met with every day, and John worked with them all the time, putting them on a bale of hay to speak. Some kids had never been up to say anything in public, and so that the whole part of, I think, our training camp was not just calves, as John would say, it was developing the whole kid. And that's what we did. And before long, the word of mouth got around, and a lot of these kids never even showed a calf ever in their life. They just wanted to be here because of what they were getting besides calf training. And so that's how it just multiplied and went on.
I think the thing that I get the most mileage out of, retrospectively, we're glad to have done all the things we did. But as Betty was saying, there are young people, age 9 through 16 or 17, wherever they were, the spectrum of ages. And many of those youngsters had never tried to speak publicly. That was a big hurdle, because how they said did we run a speech camp? No, but indirectly we did, because when your team, they were divided up into teams, groups. When one group was out there showing their calves and are practicing, the other group's out here sitting there watching, and they'd been assigned, the ones that are sitting on the bench, so to speak, over here. You watch Joe, Susie, Mary, and they'd pick somebody to critique. So after those 10 kids had done their little exercise routine that we did many, many times, the person that had been looking at Susie or Sam, they came up there and I set a bale of hay right in front of the balance of the students right there, 15 to 20 feet. And when that person had been observing and going to critique, we'll call it Susie and Joe. So Joe was sitting over here and Susie was showing her calf, practicing. So they finished, they go take a seat, and these 10 people that were inspecting them, they get up, stand up on a bale of hay. They tell their name and their age and where they're from and who they were critiquing. So my name is John Baker, and I'm 10 years old from Liberty Hill, Texas, and I was watching Susie. And Susie did this or that, critique, positive criticism. And that happened. So two things were there. Number one, the kids learned how to look, and they paid attention to what this one was doing, right and wrong. They could make suggestions when they got up there to critique. The main thing was them standing up in front of the other kids and counselors and things speaking. And when they stood up there, they need to do three things. They need to have eye contact back and forth, up and down the line. They need to have enough volume that the person in the back can hear. And so that's what and of course they had their own thing they wanted to say. But you do that over and over and over, before long the kid gets a little self-confidence that I can stand up and talk and look people in the eye. So I think from my viewpoint, I got the most money to watch kids develop. Kids that stand up there, I'm thinking of a boy that he would cry. But I didn't force anything, because he did it of his own volition. But he was so pressurized by all those people looking at him. Today, that boy, I watched him grow. He went to school, college, and today he's an ag teacher teaching other kids. And I guarantee he couldn't have stood on the bale of hay and said a word first day I met him. But a nice young man. And I watched that type of growth in these young people, and that was gratifying to me, worth the effort. Somebody up the road of life.
Well, I have a feeling you could have a lot of success stories like that, I think, of folks who went through your camp.
Yeah, we've had a lot of good thank yous and that kind of thing. You're right.
There's a young lady that this year, she was at camp those years ago, and she attributes part of her success in her FFA chapter at school. She became a state officer, and she was able to stand and speak even at their final statewide convention. You know, the route that you go there, you don't just go from 0 to that level. Probably was a district officer or regional or area, they call it, you know.
So you all are still doing the camp today, correct? It's still
No,
going on?
we stopped in 2020.
2020, okay.
Yeah, that was the end of it, because it just got to be too scary for kids sleeping in the same quarters and all that kind of thing. And so it was probably the best time to stop.
And the COVID thing, when we missed 2 years of camp, because we trained our own trainers, if you will. In other words, the kids that climb the ladder up. Mm-hmm. And so somebody that started out as an assistant
counselor,
high probability they'd be the counselor next year, because the counselor typically about seniors in high school. There may have been some exception to that, but it was about that level. And so that we were void there. You see, we didn't have anybody coming up for 2 years. So that's just the way it's supposed to be, I guess.
When you stopped doing it in 2020, what was your max capacity then? What was the most that you had?
Well, we had a total of 40, but I'm including the counselors were part of it, and then we had
40 students.
40 students, and then we had 4 counselors, and then we had Mr. Schnurger, who helped me in the kitchen, and that was about it, and so, but the total of us was like about 40. Yeah. That was a lot. A lot of eyes looking at you to eat all the time.
3 times a day, plus a snack. Sort of give all the pieces of the pie. What ingredients go into the pie?
Well, we've talked about Bevo. We've talked about your time in the show ring and about your camp. What's next? Like, where are you guys at today? What do you see as being next for your role in the breed?
While you were waiting on me about 15 minutes for my tardiness to this appointment, I was gathering up 23 24 model calves and heifers, and they just been weaned. I let them on there a little later than normal, but there's 23 of them that she just saw, quote, out of the pen, maybe, but they're all still in the pasture. But that's where I was.
And what's your plan for those that you brought up?
Those cattle, we're extremely dry here. Not just this ranch, but the area. I mean, it's I don't know what the total rainfall has been for this year, but it's probably, I won't even guess at it. It's unbelievable. 75 miles north they get rain, and 30 miles east they get rain, and 30 or 40 miles west. But there's an area, not just this ranch, but there's an area that's missed them for sure. The way I can say factual, over the period from approximately March, maybe April, May, June, July, August, September, that period of time, I can tell you, we did not get 5 inches of rain total. We get 2 tenths, 3 tenths, 4 tenths. The biggest rain I ever had was 1.3 on dry ground. That doesn't go very far. So I've been feeding these cattle along the trail. And
she asked you where these are going.
They're going to south of Houston, Texas, where a guy told me the other day, said, I've got 300 acres out there. It's never had a cow on it. Grass that they cultivate. I said, I can help you a little bit. We put something on there to cycle that grass. So that's where they're going. Houston, south of Houston. A friend of mine that has that, but I pay him and so forth. But that's, they will have plenty to eat. They're not famished now, but they've been eating short grass. Short. They'll ultimately, if any of them are worthy to continue on as Longhorn, some of them end up in a meat factory, for sure.
Well, thank you both so much for taking the time to join me today. It means a lot, and I'm glad you could share your story with the folks that might not have known about your history.
Well, thank you, Molly. I appreciate it very much. It's so good to see you.
And now let's hear from our advertisers.
From the Pasture by Hired Hand is presented by R3 Hilltop Ranch. Located in Chilton, Texas, R3 Hilltop Ranch has been breeding registered Texas Longhorns since 2006. What began as 3 heifers has grown into our current herd, which you can explore on our website at r3hilltop.com. We're passionate about loud colors, longhorns, and docile temperaments, but it's the easy-keeping, low-maintenance traits of Texas Longhorns that initially attracted us and continue to drive our herd growth. In addition to livestock, we proudly offer certified Longhorn beef products. Visit r3hilltop.com/beef to learn more. Thank you for listening and enjoy exploring our ranch online at r3hilltop.com.
Hey, if you love From the Pasture with Hired Hand, why not go check out my podcast, The Big Iron Podcast with Andrew Shigori, where we dive into the world of registered Texas Longhorns and what it means to be an agriculture entrepreneur in the modern world. With a little southern flair, of course. Find the Big Iron Podcast wherever you get your podcasts.
Planning a live auction and want to reach more buyers? Hired Hand Live brings the power of the internet to your event, allowing bidders from anywhere to participate in real time. We specialize in integrating online bidding seamlessly with your live auction, ensuring that no one misses out.
Your livestock plus our technical expertise equals one successful auction. Let Hired Hand Live help you expand your reach and maximize your results. Visit hiredhandlive.com to learn more.